Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Touchline Banter, the best place to get all of your footy knowledge and banter. I'm one of your hosts, Ruben Dario Chavez Jr., also known as Ray Chavo. With me, as always, my good friend and co-host, Cheyenne Karimi. We're going to break down some of the stuff that happened. A lot of stuff has happened in what feels like a short period of time, but we've been so busy with work and stuff. I guess it feels shorter than it probably is. But are you ready to break down what we have in the doc, Cheyenne?
Yeah, let's do it. You know, we're a little late to the party, but better late than never. There's lots of fun stuff to talk about. We promise we won't talk about Real Madrid, and honestly, it's better if we don't after Champions League results. I'm not mad, I swear. I'm just disappointed.
Tough game to watch.
Yeah,
and
very tough.
Arda Güler and Hendrick still on the didn't get to play a minute. We brought on Ceballos. Whatever. That's not what we're talking about today. We'll save those gripes for another day.
Let's talk about fun stuff. Let's talk about positive things.
Well, I don't know if this is positive. It's definitely fun, though. Considering we were right. Ten Hag didn't make it out of October. That's a shout that you had pretty early on in the pod that I kind of echoed. It seemed like for a couple weeks there, we just kept coming to the mics, and any time that United played, for the most part, we were like, when are they going to sack him? Because there was a lot of up and down results. It did always seem like he would somehow manage a result against a team to kind of save his job. Like that's historically been the Ten Hag thing, right? Like he won some league cups and stuff, and that kind of kept the Wolves at bay, so to speak. And it always felt like in other seasons there would be like, well, you know, like they hung on for a draw against like X team that's good or whatever. But this season had a bit of different flavor to it. I mean, we talked about them getting embarrassed against Liverpool. We talked about them just in general. It felt like, I mean, against most good opposition that they played this season, they looked a step behind. And even opposition like, because I think we said it before, and I've definitely heard this on other podcasts, United now are kind of like a mid-table team. Like that's how we have to start treating them. But even there's a podcast I listen to called The Football Ramble, and one of the hosts is a big Fulham fan, and Fulham played United in the first game of the season and won. They won by a goal. It was a pretty narrow win. And his initial reaction was literally just like, that's the same United team from last season. Like they got lucky, and I don't think anything has fundamentally changed. I think they're in for a long road. And it turned out to be very, very true. So there is, you know, we're kind of, the Wolves are circling Madrid's door and saying that the aura's lost. So if there's two people that can kind of sympathize with a lack of aura at the moment, it's definitely us. But I think I've done enough of a setup. I guess the first question you have here is what went wrong for Man U, and I guess I'll kick it to you because that feels like a multi-layered question beyond Ten Hag, and maybe we'll touch on some of the aura that they have lost.
Yeah. What went wrong? Ten Hag is a bad manager.
It does seem to be a big part of it. Yeah.
I think he's the actual bald-headed fraud in the Premier League. Okay, I'm done being mean. Okay,
I don't know if you're done being mean, but you're done making memes for sure.
Yeah. Oh. I swear we're gonna get serious now. I think yes, Ruben put it perfectly. This is a multi-layered issue. When you look at United, I think this has been a top-down issue stemming basically from Alex Ferguson's last season. The more and more that United seems to unravel season after season, the more, you know, players come in and they don't do well. You know, the laundry list of players: Jadon Sancho, Radamel Falcao, Angel Di Maria, Paul Pogba, Marcus Rashford. Now Bruno Fernandes is up and down. You know, and then the more managers that come in, Solskjaer, Ralph Rangnick, and Ten Hag, and Jose Mourinho, of all people, it can't just be the manager and it can't just be the players, because we've had multiple different players in, multiple different types of players in, and we've had multiple different managers with different philosophies. And you've had what me and Ruben think is arguably one of, if not the best manager of all time, and Jose Mourinho there. And yeah, he wasn't the same Mourinho of his Chelsea days and his Real Madrid days, but he came in second place, and he won trophies. And I think the systematic problem revealed itself really again in Mourinho's time, but also, my point earlier was that as more and more information comes out, as managers get sacked, information about Fergie's era starts coming out. And apparently what I'm hearing a lot and reading a lot was that towards the end of Fergie's era, he wanted Gareth Bale and he wanted to bring back Cristiano Ronaldo. Apparently the rumors were that Ronaldo was talking with Ferguson, and they basically had a deal to sign Gareth Bale, but the owners, specifically the Glazers of that time, said, no, we don't want to give you more money. They wanted to do God knows what with that money. I don't know, like pay their own finances or bills or whatever. And Fergie said, okay, you know what? I basically won the league with 30-something-year-old Robin Van Persie and playing Darren Fletcher in the midfield. And like, who was it? Like Raphael and Fabio, whoever it was, like their makeshift like wingers or whatever. So yeah, basically Robin Van Persie won them that league, and Ferguson was like, I'm out. And then I think another specific like showing of that was in the Mourinho era, when Mourinho came in second place, and he says it himself, one of my biggest achievements of my career was coming in second place with that United team. That was a pretty bad United team, with like Angel Herrera, and we had Paul Pogba was there, but he wasn't the greatest Paul Pogba, and I think Fellaini was even there at one point. Shout out Marwan Fellaini, Everton legend.
Mourinho loved Fellaini, like
yeah, a little too much, but Mourinho wanted signings, and he needed money, and he needed proper investment. And once again, the Glazers didn't want to give it to him. And he was like, okay, well, you know what? Like, I'm out. And basically they sacked him. And yes, of course, there's arguments about Mourinho's time that they didn't play the best looking football, and it was counterattacking, and, it wasn't entertaining, but they won and they had a lot of points. So I think this is obviously not just a Ten Hag issue. I do think Ten Hag was proven to be a fraud. I think that he was a well-spoken guy, and he comes from the Dutch league, and he managed Ajax really well. But at the same time, I think Ajax is a club that has such a big philosophy and ethos there that basically the club runs itself and the team plays itself. So you could put anybody there. And yes, they played really well, and they knocked out Real Madrid in the Champions League. But he was shown to his problems were highlighted in the Premier League, and he didn't know how to adjust. He didn't really have a system. And I think one of his biggest flaws was his man management problem, because when you look back at it, everybody was like, oh, Ronaldo's the problem. Ronaldo's not pressing. Ronaldo's not doing this. Ronaldo was like their best goal scorer. And like they had one of the most prosperous seasons with Ten Hag when Ronaldo was there. So he's definitely not the problem. I definitely think Ten Hag was part of the issue, but I think it's a systematic problem that's been top down to basically just disorganization, lack of funding properly into the stadium, into their facilities, into their signings. And now, we're just seeing that them just running through managers. And hopefully now not Ruben Chavez, but Ruben Amorim is going to come over and do well. I hope he does, because we like to see United do well. They're a big club, and Ruben Amorim looks like a nice guy, and he plays well in Sporting. But to me, it's just been top down, and it just trickles down to every level. But I do think Ten Hag has to take a lot of the blame, because he was almost like an ostrich at times, just burying his head in the sand and just being like, no, I will not change. And no, I will not put my arm around young players and be like, hey, you know what, kid, we don't necessarily get along, but I'm going to help you out. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I agree with some of the broad strokes. I didn't know that about the Fergie thing. I tend to believe whenever managers get into that hole, I could have signed this person, or there was a deal in place to sign that person. I put some stock into that. I also kind of I'm like, I shrugged my shoulders, and I'm like, clearly you didn't believe in it enough to force anybody's hand. And at the end of the day, I think Ferguson left at a time when United was at its lowest. Like, if you want to compare it to how Klopp has left Liverpool, like Klopp basically took Liverpool from a team that had some great players and was performing pretty well, but never really threatening to the league more often than not. And he took over from Brendan Rodgers and made it a team that became once again the European giant that a lot of people know. They won a Champions League. And did they win two? No, just one, right?
No, just one.
Just one.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one. But still, they won one, and they won the league for the first time in like years. So he really did change that club. He took them out of a dark ages, and you could argue that he left them set up for what's happening now. I give Arne Slot a lot of credit. He doesn't play the same style as Klopp did, but he also didn't change everything. He kept the parts that worked. He kept the players that worked, and still allows them to play in ways that they can enjoy and maximize. And even though I've been on this pod and been critical of like Virgil van Dijk, he's breathed new life into Virgil van Dijk to the point where Van Dijk wants to stay. Salah looks a lot happier with what's happening, whereas last season it felt like every week or every month there was a new, is he going to leave? Is he going to renew? So it's clear that he's lifted attitudes at the club. I don't think there's no way to argue that Ferguson left United in the same way. If people want to put that on the Glazers, I think they had a fair bit of it, more than half of it. I think it's like 70% their fault. But for Ferguson, falls into the trap that a lot of managers do, and this is where I think United have let themselves down more than ever. You need the backroom staff. You need someone with long-term vision. And the problem is, and you see it with coaches when they get older, they know that their coaching career is coming to an end. So how much long-term planning are you willing to do? Because it's easy to long-term plan when you're Ferguson in the 90s and you're like, well, the seeds that I'm sowing, I will get to reap in 5 years, 10 years, because I trust myself to get those results. It's a lot different trying to sow seeds when you know you're closer to the end of your managerial career than the beginning, and not knowing who's going to reap those rewards. And the Ferguson that came into United, who had a lot to prove, who was trying to bring this club back to its glories, is not the one that left. The one that had expectations and the one that had a legacy now to protect. That changes everything. So I don't give a lot of credence to that. Like, yeah, maybe there's an alternate universe where they get Gareth Bale and Ronaldo comes back. Although even that seems a bit strange, because would Ronaldo really leave? Like, at the time, La Liga was the best league in the world because of him and Messi. I think him leaving that would look like an acknowledgement that he's losing that rivalry. And I don't know that he would, for someone who's so focused on his image, I don't know that he would just bow out of that. But maybe I'm wrong.
It was like 13-14. I think it was like Mourinho's last season, and I think that's when like Ancelotti comes in. Yeah. So yeah, like I'm not sure how much stock is actually in that. I can understand like, you know, him not getting signings, like, you know. Yeah. But yeah, I do agree with that point.
But to move on from that, like, you went down the list of managers, and it's crazy because at the time when Mourinho got bombed out, many people would have said, we hate his football. We're happy to see the back of him. He didn't live up to expectations. You look just purely at the numbers. He's like the best manager post Ferguson, which is not saying a lot because it wasn't like a vintage Mourinho performance there by any means, but finished second in the league, won a Europa League. There are worse returns that you can get. And Ten Hag, it ultimately boiled down to his inability to pivot or to change. He was so stern in his ways. I do think he had a system, but his system wasn't matching up with the players that he had. And that's where you get into this thing. Like, the Glazers hired somebody and they expected them to turn the ship around, but they didn't give Ten Hag the power of like an old school manager. They were still doing the recruiting of the players, and they were recruiting players that didn't fit his system. And Ten Hag isn't a competent enough coach or a competent enough manager to still get a tune out of those players, because it's difficult. It's difficult to ask a player to do something that they don't want to do. It's difficult to ask a player to play in a way that they're not used to, because these are multi-million-dollar athletes who have played at the highest levels and who consistently throughout their lives have probably been told you're amazing and you're the best and you have the potential to be great. And to have someone who, frankly, they may not always see as deserving of the respect to listen to, they're going to think that they know what's best for them. You have to be very careful, and you have to know how to break through to players. The thing that made Ferguson special was exactly that. He knew, well, with Wayne Rooney, I can get in his face. I can tell him that he's messing this up, he's messing that up, he misplayed that, and get in his face. But there were other players, and the players at United at the time have talked about it. He wouldn't yell at other players. He wouldn't scream at other players. He wouldn't go at them. He would take the frustrations of what he would say to them and put them on other players so that they could hear it and kind of know, like, oh, I also am not doing that right. Maybe I should look at myself.
Poor David Beckham got probably a lot of it.
Well, but it sucks. But, like, you know, there are some players that can use it as motivation and some players that shy away from it, and you have to know. And yeah, when you look at the fact that Jadon Sancho didn't do anything at United and clearly can play. He was on a Dortmund team and gave them some quality starts that made the Champions League final last year. And now he's at Chelsea still doing stuff. Like, is he going to be the Jadon Sancho that we thought he was going to be? Maybe not, but he still clearly has some talent, and United could have used that. So it's a lack of being able to mold himself to the players that he had, a lack of really being able to put his arm around them and make the best out of what he had. It's just a failure. It's a failure by him. And like you said, he's kind of been exposed as a fraud. Yeah, the only question, I mean, I guess we can move on. Should they have gotten rid of him earlier? I genuinely think that they probably should have. But if you listen to Gary Neville, he basically boils it down to, well, they looked around and they didn't see a manager that they really wanted to go after, or anybody that would really fix their problems, or et cetera, et cetera. It just wasn't the right time. And obviously winning the cup gave him a bit of a shield, and maybe you can talk yourself into that. You're already paying this person a lot of money, so you don't want that to be for naught. But it also kind of felt to me that they were using him as a shield while they got the backroom stuff in order. And
that's a good point.
Yeah. So could they have sacked him sooner? Yeah. Should they have? Probably. Like, the vibes we're getting really bad there. But it feels like they were content and waiting, and they ended up getting a guy who I think most people would have been happy with if they had signed him in the summer. So no blood, no foul. I don't know how you see that.
That is a good point, and I hadn't actually thought about that. When I was posing the question of should they have sacked him earlier, because they changed the structure, and they brought in like Ineos, and they brought in Omar Barada and David Harrison, as actual directors of football, and Dan Ashworth is there now, and like. But still, like, I look at it and I'm like, is there a philosophy? Is there a type of player that you're looking for? Because, like, for example, like we talked about Liverpool and you mentioned their success. Like, I think one reason toward the end of Klopp's career, he kind of fell off and there was a little bit of frustration, was because like the technical director of Liverpool, like, he left. I can't remember his name, but I'll add it in the post editing. But he left, and Klopp just kind of started bringing in his own signings, and not all of them really worked. When the technical director was there, they were like, okay, no, listen, this is Klopp's style of play. We're going to find players that match his style of play, and we're going to grow them. And that's, when we got players like Fabinho and Van Dijk and Wijnaldum even. And then they found Luis Diaz and all these players. But when you go over the United signings in the squad, I'm wondering okay, Onana was definitely a Ten Hag guy.
He wanted to play out from the back.
Yeah. So was Lisandro Martinez. So was I think De Ligt is definitely a Ten Hag guy, just because he's Dutch and he's this guy's cool, whatever.
He used to play for Ajax, right?
Yeah, he used to play for Ajax. Yeah, I think Mazraoui also played for Ajax. I don't see the philosophy, and nobody wants to take responsibility for Joshua Zirkzee apparently, and I know Anthony was definitely a Ten Hag guy. Hopefully, if there's ever a guy who's Anthony, holy, there's that
Chinese, buddy.
Yeah. There's that clip of him just doing ball roll. There's R9 and Rivaldo and Ronaldinho, and I'm sure they're holy shit, we're fucked as a national team.
Yeah. Anthony's pretty brutal, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's not his fault, right? But yeah, definitely when he's making the faces on the sideline like he's John Wick or something, it's dude, relax. You're literally Robin, but you can be stopped. It's he's going left or right or whatever, and then it's yeah. But yeah, the system is just not there. I still don't see a definitive we have this system. We like to bring these types of players. This is how we like to play. So I can that's when I question the point of they're trying to use him as a shield for the backroom staff. And I think they should have sacked him after the final, because you know what? It's a fucking FA Cup, man. Wigan Athletic won an FA Cup against Manchester City. I get it; it's rising up in prestige again. And for a while, it was Arsenal win your FA Cups, nobody cares. But Like it's no, seriously. but it was like, I don't get the whole him and Ten Hag came out. We won the most trophies. You won an FA Cup, dude. Relax. Like seriously. Like we've seen so many random teams win the FA Cup, and I think that was a point of, hey, thank you for your service. Here's your trophy. It's not going the way we want. Leave on a high. Like I guess.
Yeah.
So like, and I think like honestly they were a little gun shy, and they honestly had a really good chance when they got battered by Tottenham. And I heard that they weren't really 100% set in on Thomas Tuchel, and I think Tuchel has his problems, but I also think he has his his positives, and I do think that he's a good manager, and I think like he is like what he succeeds at, he does really well. Like in playing his 3 at the back system and being very like well drilled and getting into his players and stuff. I do think at times he can be a little like prickly with players, and at times like he can fall out very quickly with the board and management and staff and stuff like that. But I think that because he's Premier League track record, he's won a Champions League. I think he was a pretty decent move that they could have got.
I think this is a natural place to continue then, because we've already assigned blame. I think we agree that Ten Hag has to hold the lion's share of it, but that the back room also seems a bit confused as to what the player profile is, and seemingly had a different idea than Ten Hag about what that would be. So the blame is pretty unilateral, but he's the face of it, and he's going to take a big share of it. What we've talked about, what went wrong for them, whether they should have sacked them earlier. We both kind of agree that it probably could have happened earlier. I think you're more on the side of they should have, and I'm more on the side of like I understand their weight. But the next question you had is Ruben Amorim the guy for the job? You're talking about Tuchel. He was a name that was linked. Mm-hmm. There's also always like the Graham Potter connection. I know that he's in the U.S. job now, but even Pochettino was probably a name that was being floated around and linked. So do you think he's the guy for the job? Because it seems like you're saying that they should have gone after Tuchel.
Yeah, like I think I haven't watched Amorim. I don't watch the Portuguese league. I watch a lot of football. I try to consume as much as I can. Shame. I'm sorry. I watched the highlights of the Sporting game, and I was like, this looks like a really fun team, and maybe I should have watched him more and should have watched Sporting and the Portuguese league more. I think Tuchel probably would have been the right hire, and it shows that the English national team hired him because he has a good pedigree and a track record, and he's a proven manager, and I think like he's done well where he succeeded. Is Ruben Amorim the right guy for the job? I think he can be, but it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take proper investment, and it's going to take a lot of things that weren't there with other managers. So my question is now, why is it going to change now with Ruben Amorim? Hope it does. Hope it's finally like, okay, guys, we can't just let the manager just pick players because he thinks they're cool and Dutch or Portuguese or whatever. And I also wonder, like, what style is he going to play? Because he plays like a 3-4-3-ish, kind of goes into like a 5-2-3, whatever. At Sporting, he uses like his wing backs a lot, and they like overload a lot of space on the wings. But he also has center backs who are really mobile and who are really good defensively. And I don't think he really has that at United. He definitely doesn't have the wing back thing because like I think on the left side or whatever, like if he doesn't have Luke Shaw, then you have to put Dalot there, and both of those guys are like right footed, so they have to cut in. So it caused a lot of like weird spacing issues. That's just getting really technical. But I think overall that the reason he succeeded so much is because he's been able to like push up really high and play very risky and like overload the offensive end against teams of weaker opposition. That's why he succeeded so much in Sporting and the Portuguese league, because the level of competition just isn't as high. So I'm wondering, does he really play that same system again? I don't know if he seems like a smart guy. He seems well-spoken. He seems pretty smart. He was a pretty decent former player, so he's been around. I think he's going to realize, like based off the player that he has, whether he's going to play the 3-4-3 shape or not. Is he the right guy? I'm not sure. But honestly, like I hope he is, just because I'm so tired of the Man United merry-go-round. And based off how Sporting beat Man City, hey, maybe he is. And he plays like a fun style. And maybe he can bring that to United and make United fun and cool again to watch.
Yeah. So I actually think he's the right choice. I take on everything that that you're saying. But to me, and I guess this is where I'm trying to give Ineos some credit, since they're now in charge of the football making decisions. It's the same thing that I think a lot of people would have said about the Chelsea hire. Maresca's not a hire that you make if you want the big name who's going to like seemingly change things overnight. You have to give Maresca time, not least of which because they had a squad that was like 42 men deep and no one knew who was going to be the 23 that were going to play like week in, week out. It seems like they've divided and conquered, where there's like a team for the Europa Conference League, a team for the Cups, and a team for the league, which might prove to be the smartest tactic of all if they can pull it off and go deep in all of those competitions. Ruben Amorim seemingly is a very smart and cautious and the kind of person that doesn't take a job just to take it. When he started his coaching career, he had an opportunity to coach for Benfica, which is the club that he played at and the club that like his hometown club. And he rejected coaching their B team because they wouldn't give him control in terms of like the players that you could play and stuff. They wanted it basically to be more like what a lot of teams use their B teams for, like kind of at the behest of the senior team, and like you're going to play it in a way that's beneficial for them, not strictly beneficial for your team and to win. So he decided to not do that, and he ended up at Braga. Well, he was at Casa Pia, and then Braga paid a transfer fee for him of like, oh no, not Braga, but he ended up at Braga, and then to get him from Braga, Sporting paid a 10 million euro transfer fee for him because of what he had done at Braga, which shows you just the level that he's rated at, because that's a lot of money to pay for a coach. Like 10 million euros is nothing to sneeze at. And I agree, he gets away with playing an aggressive style because Sporting play in a league that's, I mean, you know, it's really Sporting, Benfica, and Porto. But Sporting weren't really affecting the league at the top of it for a while before he came in. He kind of turned around the culture. So if they're going to give him time, if they're going to give him investment, if they're going to allow themselves for him to change the culture at the club and the team, then it'll work. But if not, then yeah, this is going to be horrible. But I think that it's worth the risk because in Ruben Amorim, you might find a coach kind of like Arteta, a coach kind of like Klopp, a coach kind of like Pep Guardiola, like someone who's really going to make a top-down difference if you give him a chance and if you let him cook for a bit. There's going to be some teething issues. Like it's like you said, they play three at the back. In attack, it's like a 3-4-2 or whatever.
3-4-3.
The 3-4-3. I mean, at times I've seen it described as like a 3-3-4. Like they get really up.
Whoa. Oh, they're playing like ultimate team.
They get really aggressive. Really aggressive. But obviously we saw, and we're going to try to talk about it in a bit, but we saw that they can set up in a very defensive counter attacking way as well. Ultimately, when you go from playing 4 at the back to 3 at the back, there are some players that are just not going to be suited to that. So we see it every time Conte takes over a team, to be completely frank. Like you're going to have to ship out some players, you're going to have to bring new ones in, and that's a process, because maybe we can touch on this next, because before we get on to the game where they played City, but what needs to be done, I'm going to switch that question to like, how many of these players are still going to be around next year? Like, honestly,
yeah.
If you are Ruben Amorim, who are the players that you're like, well, we have to keep him, we have to keep him, we have to keip him? Because that list is not very long. I don't think. Like, it's a pretty short list.
Oof. Yeah. If like I'm pulling up the squad right now. Like if you just go like, yeah, I guess he keeps Onana because plays out the back, sure, whatever.
And I actually think Onana gets more hate than but that's a different thing.
Yeah, no, I honestly like I'm kind of growing more on Onana, and when I look at the games, I don't think necessarily he's the problem. Maguire, I think he's gone. Lindelof probably gone. I think he probably keeps Dallo, and Martinez and Malacia and Luke Shaw. Man, I forgot Lenny Yoro was on Man United.
Yeah, because he got hurt.
Yeah. Hurt. Wow. That very epitomizes a United season.
Anthony has to go.
Yeah, Anthony's gone. Mason Mount is gone. Eriksson, I guess he might stays for the locker room things. I think
Rashford, I think, has to eventually leave. I don't know.
Rashford probably goes. I think he probably keeps Xerxes. Maybe he sends him out like on a loan, and I don't know if he really fits his system because he does play like wingers and strikers who can kind of like alternate in the three, like like Trincao and Goncalves and Gyökeres all kind of like move around a lot. I think he needs signings though. I think the wingbacks are really key to his system, and I think he needs to sign somebody because like, dude, Mizraoi's mid. I think like a lot of the signings that they made and brought in from this era, this previous transfer window, I really think all of them were mid. When you look at a lot of the signings, like De Ligt was bad basically everywhere he went except for Ajax.
I've been trying to cape for De Ligt because it should be there for him, but he's regressed every time.
It should. Honestly, I like the kid as well, especially out of Ajax. I'm like, oh, okay, this guy could be really cool. Maybe he's the next, like, kind of like, you know, Jaap Stam or Van Dijk or whatever, the, you know, well-spoken, you know, fierce Dutch guy. But he was in and out of Juventus squad. He was in and out of Bayern Munich squad. And, like, you know, Munich was willing to sell him to United. I think that says a lot. And, you know, Mizraoui, again, was pretty mid as well. Like, I think he needs wing backs. I think he needs center backs. I think the midfield he can probably work with. I do think Garnacho and Højlund will probably excel under his system.
I think players like Garnacho, Højlund, Mainu, and Bruno are going to be the core of that team that he's going to move on forward with. There are some players that will stay just because you can't sell everybody all at once, and there are some players that are going to have to wait and see. But like Anthony and some of the players that we've touched on that are clear failures of the eras that have passed are going to have to find homes elsewhere. I don't think Maguire and even a guy like Eriksson who's getting older, I don't think they're long for this team.
No,
ultimately. But we can dive into their game against Manchester City. If you're a United fan, you're very happy. I mean, Ruben Amorim said it himself. If I win this game, they're going to look at me as like I'm the second coming of Alex Ferguson. And he won. He didn't just win. He won pretty convincingly.
Yeah.
4-1. I know you said you only watched the highlights. I ended up watching it on replay, obviously, because I watched the Real Madrid game live, which probably should have swapped to this one, but whatever. So we've talked a lot about Amorim and United, so maybe we'll leave the positives for them off to the side for a bit. Let's get a bit negative. What went wrong for City, and does this worry you? This is the first time they've lost 3 consecutive games in a while because they lost to Sporting, they lost to Bournemouth, and I forget the other loss currently off the top of my head. And Newcastle.
Newcastle.
In the cup. Newcastle in the cup. Yep. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, no, not Newcastle. It was Spurs. Spurs in the cup.
Yeah.
Spurs.
Yeah. I think, like, what went wrong for City? I think the first half was basically all City. The Sporting had like 1 or 2 chances. Gyökeres has a chance like threw in the first half that he absolutely should put away. I think he kind of just mishits it. But City had like plenty of chances. I think the keeper Israel had a really good game overall. He made like a ton of like big saves. But overall, I just think they had a lot of chances that they didn't really take. They had injury issues. They started some young kid in center back
because Stones was out and
Simpson Pusey, something like that was his name. I'll get it right. Like they had moments of, you know, the passing play that they were good in the classic like City ball, but there was also moments that, you know, led to like 1 or 2 of the goals when they were just getting a little too cute and they got caught out in possession and they basically just got blitzed on the counter attack. I think like I don't know really what happened right off of kickoff in the second half. It was a beautiful passage of play from the Sporting side, but like City's defense kind of just like fell asleep and the Sporting player just kind of goes through and it's a beautiful through ball, but it's like, what happened there, guys? Like, did we forget to come out? Like, do we forget, like, you know, it's we're starting again. I think a lot of like players didn't really have the best game for City. Like Bernardo Silva had his chances, but overall I feel like he looked off. Erling Haaland, I think, he did get goalied a little bit with a couple of chances, but he should definitely score that pen. And I think that maybe changes the game.
Yeah, he seems not 100% fit.
Yeah.
It seems like he's still.
Yeah. Overall, I just think that like it shows that City like really struggles to break down teams that kind of like sit back and hit them on the counterattack the way Ruben Amorim's side did. They struggle with this issue before, and it's a big issue for them when they have their big players injured. Like when you look at the injury list, it was Ruben Diaz, Stones, Grealish, Rodri, Oscar Bob, and we know that Kevin De Bruyne is still nowhere to be seen. It just wasn't the best performance, especially in the second half. I just think that they just got, counterattacked pretty simply.
They fell apart, yeah.
Pretty simply. I think they had chances that they could have taken, and it could have been, maybe a different scoreline. But credit to Amorim's side. They played defensively well, and I think just City probably could have made changes earlier. They could have tried to change the system, but I get it as well. They really don't have a deep bench right now, so it wasn't like a terrible performance. But the second half really was not good from what I saw, at least from the highlights.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The second half is kind of where Sporting got all of their joy. I'm not going to let anybody cry injury here. Like, teams get injured. You also have a squad that's cost like hundreds of millions and millions and millions of dollars in charges to build. So I don't feel sorry. You have a team that's talented enough to take on a Portuguese team, no matter where they are in the league. Yeah, but it all ultimately comes down to Sporting took their chances. City did not, and City did not look at their best, which will happen. It'll happen in the Champions League, but it's just very funny. Credit to Sporting, and I mean, if you're a Sporting fan, I'm sure it's not great to see a coach or a manager leave midway through the season, but he gave you one last great night in Europe. That's got to be something to feel good about, for sure.
What a way to go!
Yeah, and in terms of what United fans can take, I think it's clear that he's an intelligent enough coach and a tactically astute enough coach to understand that he has to change his approach. The first half didn't really go to plan. He came out in the second half with a renewed plan, got his players to really defend deep, hit them on the break. City were trying to do what they always do, which is overload people with control and with pressure. You leave yourself exposed if the right passes can come. I do feel sorry for Amorim, though, because he's going from Gyökeres to Xerxes and Højlund, who have not shown themselves to be quite at the level that he's been playing at, but maybe he can unlock something in them. If you're a United fan, I think the positive is just like, yeah, it seems like you have a coach that's willing to adapt. You have a coach that's willing to play. And if you notice in this run of terrible results, Pep Guardiola hasn't been talking about how lovely the football that's been played against them has been. So that's something to hang your hat on.
I didn't hear the classic so good from Pep.
So good. They're so good.
One thing I do want to highlight on City's end that is kind of like alarming, which I do think, again, it isn't an injury issue because they don't have their full squad, but they have faced the most fast break shots in 2024-25 at 28 in the Premier League. And West Ham is second with 18. And apparently they're giving up like basically a rate of roughly 3 times higher than last season. I do think Kyle Walker getting older and him being out of the squad is definitely an issue on that like right side. But this was definitely like the amount of times that Gyökeres and Araujo basically just got in behind and just blitzed them on the counter. Like
Kyle Walker was getting skinned against Bournemouth. He was getting skinned. It was a bad game against Bournemouth. Yeah, he's getting older. He's a pace merchant, but the pace leaves you eventually. You can't.
Yeah, he's one of those players who's definitely relies on his physicality. So for sure. Yeah.
I don't have anything else to say about the game. I think you kind of nailed everything I was going to say. And if you're a United fan, the only thing I have to say is like, yeah, this isn't going to be the blueprint 100% for you guys because it's going to be different, obviously. But you have a coach that's willing to play games. Like, you have a coach that's willing to make tactical changes. The fact that his team went into the half looking like the worst side and then came out of it looking like the better side, I can't describe a lot of times that's happened for United. So like in the recent time. So to me, that's something that you should hang your hat on.
One last thing I will say on Sporting side, if there's one player that Ruben Amorim and Man United need to bring from Sporting is Victor Gyökeres. Holy shit, this guy is so good. 17 games played, 23 goals. And I get it, he plays in a league that doesn't have the best competition, but he plays well against Europe, against big teams. And like, I swear to God, like as a Real Madrid fan, I will give you Kylian Mbappe and like my car and the shirt off my back and like all my, like, I don't know, my rare Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon cards for Victor Gyökeres, right?
Gyökeres against Milan for Real Madrid, we would have killed them.
Yeah, but yeah, I definitely think he should go. They should bring him. They should make an effort.
Yeah, I agree. I think they should sign him. So the last topic we wanted to touch on, and I mean, we're at about 40 minutes, so that gives us about 10 to 15 is to hit where we usually are at. So it's enough time to, I think, talk about it. You just wrote Arsenal title hopes over ? Reaction to loss to Newcastle. This is being recorded before their game on Wednesday in the Champions League against Inter, just so that's clear. So anything that we say is not including their form in that game, because how could it? We don't know what's going to happen yet. That being said, do you think it's over for them?
I'm so torn because hold on, let me just pull up the table quickly.
They're like 5 points behind City and like
it's so early, like this point in the season, like 10 games in. I think it's really, really early to call and say like the title hopes are over, because anything can happen. And like, for God's sakes, like Nottingham Forest is in third. Shout out Nottingham Forest and all their fans.
Hey, champions of Europe.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, is it necessarily over? I'm going to say no, just because the amount of time that there is and just the amount of games that can be played. And there's a transfer window that could come and maybe they sign somebody like another striker or whatever they feel that they need. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But just a run of form changes it. But it did not look good against Newcastle, a team who's really like struggled this season as well. But like Alexander Isak just put in that one goal early, and it was basically the game. Like Arsenal, like the big players didn't show up. I didn't see any really good performances from Saka, Martinelli. I know Marino has just finally come back, but like he's kind of struggling to find his form. And yes, he's going to need time, and I think he's going to do well, which actually former Newcastle player well. And apparently, like I was listening to like a Newcastle guy talking about this game, and he was like, yeah, like they rated Mikel Marino, but it was just he was very like up and down with his form. Like some games he'd be really, really good, and some games he'd just be like a no-show. And I definitely think this game was like a no-show for him. I don't know. It's tough to say like what really is the problem at Arsenal right now, because it seems like they're struggling to score goals. It seems like, against certain teams they kind of just fall asleep at certain times. I'm wondering, about certain signings now, whether like someone like Raheem Sterling was kind of just like a panic buy, or was he actually a shrewd mood? There's a lot of questions there. I think there's time, but I think things need to be turned around quickly. And if they don't, I do think that kind of Liverpool and City are just going to pull away.
Yeah. If you're an Arsenal fan, the thing that scares me, you're kind of going through what we're going through now. You have a manager that doesn't seem like they have a plan B, which is a scary place to be. We've given Carlo a lot of credit, and I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I'm definitely not going to turn this into a Real Madrid conversation. But there is a feeling now amongst Real Madrid supporters that it's like, okay, sure, we have injuries. We had players that left. Where is the tactical thing that's going to change this? Where is the directive and the instructions to the players that's going to change this? Because it's clear that allowing them to figure this out on their own is not going to work. For Arsenal, I actually don't think it's the same thing. I think Arteta is giving them tactical directions. It's just the tactics work much better when you have Odegaard in the middle. We talked about it when he went down. He's not just important to their attack, which has looked a lot more blunt without him there. He's important to their defense in the way that he presses, his ball winning ability, how he retains possession, et cetera, et cetera. He's an important player to how they defend and what they do. And I find it interesting that last year, Arsenal also had a very physical encounter with Newcastle. I think that one ended in a draw, or maybe a narrow win for Arsenal. But Arteta was very quick, and he said it after this game too, that Newcastle are a very physical team, and they'll kind of try to drag you into the mud. But last year, he started Jorginho and they didn't play into their hands. They didn't try to match strength for strength. They tried to out finesse them almost. And this year it felt like Arsenal was a lot more comfortable, and the profile of the player have changed. They have a lot of big boys and a lot of strong guys who they thought maybe we could go toe to toe. It just didn't end up being enough. Odegaard coming back will improve things. If I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm just worried because it doesn't seem like Arteta has a plan B. It seems like he needs to have his starting 11, his players not injured and healthy. And in an era where there's so many competitions, where Arsenal are going to be expected to go deep in every competition, like, it's not. That's the difference. When you start becoming a team that routinely challenges for the Premier League, that also means that people expect you to challenge for the Champions League. That also means that people expect you to be deep in the League Cup and the FA Cup, and to not only be deep in the competition, but to have a real shot of winning. So injuries are going to happen. Squad rotation has to happen. The instructions and the tactics game to game have to change. Obviously, like I said, we're not going to know before we're done recording this what's going to happen against Inter. But if they come out and once again they're flat against the team and then they lose or they just hold on to a draw, that's a bad sign. So it's not over. There's a lot of time left. It's the same thing that I've been saying, on the podcast when we were talking about El Clasico. It's not over. Like, Madrid are 9 points behind right now because Barcelona have played an extra match, but there's still a long season left there. There's still a long season left here. We're not even at Christmas yet. There's that famous saying that, like, don't even look at the table until Christmas. So it's there's still plenty of time. I would just worry if I was an Arsenal fan that Arteta seems out of solutions, and this isn't an injury that was just sprung on him before the Newcastle game. They haven't been with Odegaard for 12 games, and they haven't looked good in most of those games. So to me, that's the worry, that where is the change going to come? Is it just going to be an improvement of form, like you said? I don't know.
Yeah. It's a telling tale that they had 64% possession basically and just had one shot on goal. I think you nailed it, that absolutely they missed Martin Odegaard. And I think they had players that could possibly, find that key pass in behind and, break the defense open with the likes of like Marino or Declan Rice, or even Saka has done it a lot of times. I'm just wondering why they're so reliant on a player like Odegaard. One question I wanted to pose to you quickly was, I was watching like Sky Sports, and Carragher was talking about Arsenal, and he was saying that he I don't 100% agree with the analogy, but I kind of agree with where he's going with it. He was saying that basically Arteta is molding himself in the ideology of Mourinho because he realizes that he doesn't have the offensive firepower and the squad size and depth to compete with Pep. So he's decided to go basically in the other direction of finding tall, physical players who are good at set pieces and being more defensively sound and finding ways to win games like that. I don't necessarily agree with that he's going the Mourinho way, but I do think, and I don't think he's becoming Mourinho or whatever, because he still has the Arteta vibes about him. But I can kind of understand that him realizing that he doesn't have the squad and the attacking depth to compete with City, so he goes the other way and says, let's be more defensively sound, let's be more physical. And they have scored a lot of goals off of set pieces, not just this season, but especially last season as well. So do you think there's any truth to that, or do you think Carragher is just kind of reaching?
No, a lot of people are making the comparison. A lot of people are saying that, in a way, Arteta's trying to be the Jose Mourinho to Pep's Manchester City.
The finger.
Yeah. I don't think it's 100% a like for like, because I do think there are a lot of fundamental differences between how Arsenal defend and what they're looking for in a game than what Mourinho sides typically do. But yeah, I just think the reality is everybody expects him to be a Pep Guardiola disciple in the same way that like Company is and was when he was in the Prem, where it's like Burnley are going to play open and free flowing, whether they're equipped to or not. Like I think that's a detriment. Like, I think that is a detriment. If you never change your tactics, if you never look at the game and the opponent you are up against, and you just always think, no, like, our way is going to win because our way is right, I think that is a bad thing. I genuinely do. unless you are in the position of Manchester City, where like genuinely because of resources and investment and how they've built up not just the backroom staff, not just the players that are starting, not just the squad players, the 23 that make up their matchday squad, but their youth teams and their academy. They've basically revamped the whole thing to play this way. God help them when Pep isn't there to keep the lights on, because like there's not a lot of Peps just rolling off of the assembly line. I'll say that. But so I think it's a positive thing that Arteta seems willing to ditch some of those philosophies and tenets when it's convenient for him. I think being dogmatic to a system ultimately gets you buried, because it can look good, but like, you know, a lot of Spurs fans were beating Ange over the head over the fact that he never plays defensive. Now they just had a very fun win against Aston Villa, but that's because that Villa team looked awful and shell-shocked, and the game was open, and Spurs took advantage of it. But if that game had ended like a lot of Spurs games do, where they score first and then don't hold the lead and play naively, and Villa won 2-1 late, like people would be like, how do we keep getting beat on a set piece, right? And I mean, Villa did bring it back to a draw off of a set piece, or they cut it to within one, I forget. So yeah, I guess he's being more Mourinho than Pep right now. And like, yeah, his attack isn't as strong as the Manchester City attack. If Carragher wants a cookie for noticing that Erling Haaland is a great striker, and that they don't have Erling Haaland, they have Kai Havertz. Like, yeah, I agree. Arteta's being much more defensively sound. It'll be interesting to see if it stays this negative when Odegaard is there. Because then, if it stays this negative when Odegaard's back, then I'll say he's full Mourinho. Like, but he's missing one of his more creative players, and I think ultimately right now he's doing what a lot of managers do. Hey, he's being a Gareth Southgate, if we want a different comparison, because comparing anyone to Mourinho is a bit sacrilegious. He's a better Gareth Southgate, but they both won the same amount of stuff. Oh God, no, that's mean. No, but. Like it is that thing where it's like we're going to protect the back, and then we'll take what we can get going forward. I think that's a lot of what Arteta's doing, and whether you agree with it or not, that seems to be his way ahead. I mean, every time they go down to 10 men, they basically play like they're just hanging on.
Yeah,
like they don't offer anything. Yeah. Like, and again, we commended them against City, and largely I think that's the right way to go, but there are teams that even when they're down to 10, I mean, Spurs famously as a good example, they're North London roommates. When Ange went down to like 10 men, he's like, we're still going to play the same way. But it's like, I only know how to play one way, mate. It's like, okay. You enjoy getting 3 goals scored on you. Like, oh, what are we doing here? So, yeah. I think a lot of people are making that comparison. And it's because it would be nice. I think we're getting pretty long, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. I think a lot of people, because in other sports it's so easy to see like a coaching tree, like it's very like, oh, like this guy coached under Pop, and like he runs the same actions as Pop does. And in the NFL, it's even more pronounced. It's like, well, yeah, like he's like a Belichick coach. Well, Belichick was a Parcells guy, like this other guy, and like then all of like the fucking Shanahan tree, and then the McVay tree, and et cetera, and you can see the concepts that they take. Whereas like in football, those exist, obviously, like company isn't coaching the way that he does, just purely based out of nothing. But I think it's a lot harder to, especially nowadays where the game is, to just be like a disciple of someone, because like the resources are so different. Like it's like we just spent like 30 minutes talking about Ruben Amorim. He's gonna have to remake that squad, but on a pure resource level, if United back him, he's going to have more money at his disposal than he's ever had. So like he could maybe play in a way that he hasn't before, that he's always wanted to, if he has the money to unlock that, right? Like it's hard to say. So Arteta now he's just trying to win. He's trying to win. Yeah. Because I think if Pep retires or leaves for a bit and Arteta doesn't beat him to a league, That's gonna be hard. That's gonna be hard to swallow for everybody.
That ends any talks to that so-called rivalry or whatever. I think I think you basically nailed it on the head there. I do think he's definitely leaning towards more like Mourinho-esque tactics, and maybe he needs to call him up and be like, how the hell did you get Goran Pandev to like play on the left side and press the entire game and cover Messi? I just quickly, I think he's very obsessed with certain things, like, you know, like winning individual duels and winning the battles. You kind of saw it in the Amazon documentary. Like, he's like going off and he's like, yeah, like you have to win every single duel because in the game it's a goal. It's like, well, I'm like, I don't know. I think he's a little kind of like a little nuts in that aspect. Like, not like kind of could be in a good way, but it also can be bad. I think, yeah, like he tries to be pragmatic like Mourinho was. And I think sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, because no, not everybody is a Mourinho. But I mean, to wrap it up, I think like Arsenal fans, it's early. We talked about it. We said it, you know, don't look at the table until Christmas. And worst case, if it doesn't work out, you can always sack Arteta and bring in Sam Allardyce because he'll fix everything.
Big Sam. Yeah, get him in there. Yeah.
I saw rants of him like talking about, he's just like, since when was tiki-taka the only way of playing? He's like, nobody told me that. I hate this shit.
Where's David Moyes right now? Someone call him.
Oh, God.
All right. We're at 55 minutes. This is a good place to stop. Guys, we want to thank you for listening. We're going to keep trying to be as consistent as we can. Next week, we discussed this before we started rolling, but I think we're just going to give a snapshot as to where the Premier League is, talk about some big storylines that have developed, and both the Premier League and the Champions League. It'll be a lot more of an overview than like a deep dive on any one thing. Seems like we've done a run of deep dives lately, but I think these are all things that we felt passionate to talk about, so we wanted to give them their space. And to Ten Hag, we want to thank you for the memes and for the content. And I don't know if we'll ever see you again on the British Isles, but wherever you end up coaching or being a pundit, I hope that you are well.
I think take a page of Stephen A's book. Man United fans, the City of Red Devils, time to celebrate. It's like when Kwame Brown got traded. You got rid of him. You're free. It's over.
Ten Hag's the Kwame
it's over.
Brown of managers. That's
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for watching. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.